Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to the channel, and today we're going to start with the first chapter of a read-along of my book, Archangel. Let's put it more into frame there. Archangel. Now, Archangel came out last February, and it's my debut novel and the first in the Shadows Advent series. And since then, I've been having a fantastic time with it. And the people that have read it, my friends, family, new fans, absolutely loved it, and it's really inspired me to keep writing the rest of the series and other things. But what I found during one of my many read-throughs of it is that there's still some errors here and there, so I figure rather than just go on this journey by myself, we do a read-along. I take you through the entire book, start to finish, one chapter a week, and you get a little commentary at the same time. So, without further ado, let's start with chapter 1. Oh, and just for everyone, let's check out this sweet cover art. Oh yeah, and the back. Amazing. Absolutely phenomenal. I'm obsessed with it. Chapter 1. He could feel the heat as his body plummeted. Molecules of oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon ignited around him as he approached the blanket of ebony clouds. His ethereal form began to change as tissue and flesh crawled across bones that had not been there moments before. A heart that only just started beating was slowly enclosed by a hardened cage, but layers of muscle and skin sealed the precious organ in a sculpted chest. Skeletal fingers writhed in the agony of the transformation as nerves formed and were immediately exposed to the searing pain of the passing atmosphere. Milky eyes appeared underneath a curtain of eyelids, striking blue orbs that gained more and more clarity as time inched along. The descent seemed to go on forever. A mouth that had just formed lips grimaced through the torment, the roar of the wind muting any sound it could have made. The tan skin, despite the heat and debris that littered the air, seemed to glow. It rejected the burns that should have disfigured it. Instead, black markings began to appear on the delicate flesh, growing and twisting, forming ornate patterns and symbols. The figure forced its eyes open, only for an instant, just in time to bear witness as it crashed into the wall of darkness. Thunder roared as tongues of lightning kissed the newly formed body. The storm should have killed it, should have overloaded its nervous system, but it refused to give in. The rushing wind sounded like screams echoing in the darkness, begging it to join them in their anguish. A storm of ice and rain raged within the clouds, each drop like a bug biting its glowing skin, but leaving no mark. And then suddenly, it was over. The naked body broke through the black clouds and could see once again. With each second, the being drew closer and closer to the ground. Its eyes watered as it strained to keep them open. With only a single breath left, it allowed itself the luxury of blinking. The figure crashed into a forest of dead and withering trees, punching into the dirt like a bullet tearing into flesh. Earth and stones erupted into a plume of dust, forced outwards in a sphere that flattened the trees into a ring of barren wood. Amid the dust cloud, a shadow of a figure emerged. Tall, muscular, with cropped dark hair and tan skin, Uriel stepped out of the crater, rolling his stiff shoulders. Now, something that's important to note is Archangel took me the better part of 4 or 5 years to actually go from idea to creation, and there were countless revisions of it, some scenes that never made it. There's a whole handful of chapters that were pushed to book 2, thanks to feedback from some early readers. But this opening scene, this opening description of Uriel falling, hasn't changed since day one, and I absolutely am obsessed with it. Carrying on. It was strange being on Earth once again. The experience was not a common one for an angel, but even less so for an archangel. He rubbed the stinging dust out of his eyes. Dirt was not something found in heaven, and now he stood in a world that was covered with it. He felt a snug metallic ring around his neck, perfectly smooth save for the finest of engravings. It was his halo, the symbol that he was a warrior of heaven. It was a symbol he bore with pride. But it was one that would have to be hidden if he wanted to survive and walk freely in this new Earth. Neither the Archangel nor any of heaven's denizens had any idea how the planet had been changed in the years after they lost the war. The black clouds of hell obscured their vision from heaven, a curtain that grew thicker with each victory the infernal hordes claimed. Merely breaking through the barrier had taken its toll on the angel. Uriel had only just arrived, and he could barely steady himself. The Archangel glanced down at his physical body, no longer naked but fully clothed. His garments always manifested just as his body did, a transformation that still, even after thousands of millennia, was not fully understood by him. He found himself in sorry shape, however, and already longed for the days when his physical form would boast shining plates of armor. Now he wore dark, near-tattered pants and a duster that almost went to his knees. It was light enough to fight in, but would still protect his body from the elements. His boots were on the heavy side, at least for human footwear, as was the black leather vest that he wore over his chest. Some armor is better than none, he thought, but heaven must be truly waning for this to be the best we have. At his hips were 2 knives with 4 sister blades on his belt at his back. On his left, Uriel's blade hung in its sheath, completing the only physical weapons he brought with him. Even with his familiarity with the blades and the knowledge that they had tasted the flesh of countless demons, Uriel thought himself under-equipped, as naked as when he had been falling. Humans had become voracious in their advancement of weaponry since he had last visited the planet. Compared to some of the technology and guns that they had created, Uriel's weapons seemed like relics. He laughed at the mere thought of the weapons, that his father would allow the humans to craft something that could kill even angels. Though it would take more than 1 shot to fell him, Uriel had no desire to join the nothingness that awaited his kind when they died, not when he finally had his chance to fight back against the creatures that ruled this new earth. He had his magic too. He could heal and destroy, do things that humans could hardly fathom, but much of his power was drawn directly from heaven, a connection that was, at best, flickering. The black clouds of hell did not just shroud his vision, but anything holy. Uriel was oppressed under their smothering weight, his powers a fraction of what they should be. All of heaven knew that the clouds enveloping the world were just one of the ways Lucifer secured his hold on the planet. Uriel still had some powerful abilities at his disposal, but he knew that he would be relying on his physical weapons more than his divine ones. He could feel the tattoos that covered his body pulsing, trying to establish that link to his home, but to no avail. He realized then that those, too, would need to be covered. While his vestments already shrouded most of his body, his face was completely exposed. The Archangel stooped down, grabbed the burnt dirt at his feet, and wiped it on his face, creating a haphazard mask. He spat as some of it got in his mouth and wiped it away when it stung his eyes. It was a poor attempt at hiding the lines and patterns that crisscrossed his face, but it would have to do. It was impossible to describe angels in their natural form. They just were. But when they descended to earth, they were very much physical, very much mortal. It made them vulnerable, but most compensated with martial and magical prowess. Though even that had not been enough to save them from being overrun. The legions of hell were too powerful. Heaven stood no chance in the war. Now, these long years later, this planet belonged to them. There was no sun to guide his way or give him direction, just a reddish-gray light that permeated the world. It did not matter. Directions would be useless in a world where he knew nothing of its landscape, but Uriel could reach out all around him, using his angelic senses to detect nearby evil. The Archangel quickly discovered that, like his other abilities, his senses were dulled by the thick black clouds hanging above. Any presence around him felt more like a fleeting shadow than a life. He could not focus on a single target, but something was nagging at his senses. Far off in the distance, he felt a great radiating evil, stronger than the rest. Uriel figured that, if he wanted to learn about this new world, that dense evil would be as good a place as any to start. The angel's feet crushed ancient leaves and desiccated branches as he walked through the skeleton of the forest, small cloudbursts of dirt and dust rising with each step. A brief thought crossed the angel's mind, and he wondered whether all the branches were indeed pieces of trees, not the bones of beasts, men, or even his slain brothers and sisters. He forced the thought from his mind and focused on that which he knew for certain. The forest was barren, but the shadows cast by the trees were unnaturally dark and encroaching. It presented both a blessing and a curse. The darkness allowed him to move without prying eyes observing his movement, but also prevented him from seeing anything that moved around him. It was a far cry from what the planet was before the war. The world had once been lush and beautiful. Uriel would spend days gazing down on the beauty of his father's creation, marveling in the vast oceans and sprawling countryside. Nothing was like that in heaven. The denizens of heaven were not physical beings and needed no such wonders. They only adopted a physical body when they descended to the more material realms. As the skeletal trees began to thin and their dark shroud faded, Uriel realized he was reaching the edge of his cover. The closer he came to the threshold, the more the darkness that limited his vision weakened and his full sight returned to him. When he finally cleared the forest of skeletons, the angel emerged into a small town. Or rather, what used to be a small town. A handful of the buildings still stood, but most appeared to have been burned to the ground or smashed to pieces. A dirt road ran through the town, but both its entrance and exit seemed to have been reclaimed by the forest. Combined with its unnatural darkness, Uriel wondered how dead the forest really was, or if it too were some ravenous, dark organism. Any human taking refuge in the town would never be able to intentionally find their way out of the dark woodland, their starved and lost bodies inevitably becoming nutrients for the brush. The Archangel was thankful that he had some sort of destination, that he could feel the evil in the distance. He could not sense anything in the town, however, nor in the surrounding forest. He did not know how reliable his perception was yet, but he imagined that such ruins would not be home to anything more than rats. The Archangel, as silent as the empty buildings he approached, walked into the town along its single dirt road. Had there been more? The angel thought. Has the darkness consumed all but these few buildings? It was possible, as Uriel could only see a half-dozen houses or their remnants, some sort of shop, and a broken building at the end of the road. No community could survive with so little, not with the hordes of hell festering across the planet. The Archangel walked up to the first house he came to and peered inside. The occupants had left in a hurry. Uriel could see a dinnerware on the table, stained with the shadow of an old, rotted meal that had long since been abandoned. A pair of wine glasses sat upon the table, one toppled over at the foot of the other. The floor beside the table was stained and covered in mold growing from the contents of a bottle of wine that had rolled off and shattered years ago. Through another window he saw toys scattered on the floor next to a couch, and pictures of young children with their parents adorning the wall, all of them covered in a thick layer of dust. No violence had tainted this house, but Uriel could not help but wonder whether the occupants had made it far. The next house painted a very different scene. The windows were covered with planks of wood, nailed from the inside. The door had been torn away from its frame, creating a jagged, splintered entrance. The angel stepped inside the building and was immediately shaken with sorrow. Pictures and tables had been smashed and overturned in every room. A cabinet, toppled over, lay atop a crushed human skeleton, bony arms protruding from each side. Its skull, however, was nowhere to be found. In the kitchen, Uriel discovered a skeletal arm, desiccated fingers still loosely grasping a meat cleaver. The Archangel grimaced as he found the matching arm on the other side of the room, while the rib cage and a leg were perched atop the kitchen counter. The remaining leg, like the other body's head, was absent. Reading that out loud's hard work. Props to, the teachers and the audiobook narrators. Or parents. The Archangel ascended the stairs to the second floor. He knew he was not going to find anyone up there, but felt an urge to look nonetheless. The first bedroom did not show many signs of a struggle, save for the closet door lying in splinters, torn from its hinges. The next room could not have been more different. Uriel guessed that it had once been painted a light blue, but much of the walls were covered in old, dried blood, giving them a cracked, reddish-brown coat. Claw marks were the only other decorations on the wall, but something else drew the angel's eye. On the small bed in the far corner of the room sat a pile of bones. Treading carefully over the dried patches of blood and rotted flesh, Uriel approached the grisly mound and looked at the yellowed remains. He saw a combination of all sizes and body parts. A handful of skulls were mixed with femurs, ribs, and hip bones. The Archangel nearly winced at the sight of the smallest bones, limbs that could not have belonged to children more than a few years old. It was all he needed to see before he turned and left the macabre scene. Macabre? Macabre? I think it's macabre. We're going with macabre. The remaining two houses looked much like the first, but with more signs of panic. All of the buildings had been coated in a thick layer of dust, and the angel knew that no one had lived in any of them for years. Every now and then, the wind would rush through the dilapidated structures, creating the sound of a distant scream. Some noises were easily excused, the wooden panels of the houses straining as the air rushed through their seams. Others sounded too visceral, too panicked, for the Archangel to find a logical explanation. A small store sat across from the ruins of two houses. Uriel felt no need to examine the destroyed homes. Instead, he entered through the front door of the shop. A small bell announced him as he walked through. The inside of the building was also undisturbed, the aisles of shelves still stocked with cans of food. Anything not in cans had been eaten by vermin and scavengers years ago, their only memories manifested as black stains on shelves and stands. The store confirmed the Archangel's suspicion that this town had not been looted. Whatever had come through here had the sole intention of spilling blood. Some supplies were missing, but the widespread looting that Uriel had witnessed during the first months of the war, before the planet was smothered in darkness, was not evident. A ladder in the back room led to the roof of the store. After taking it 2 rungs at a time, Uriel opened a hatch to the outside. I feel like heroes always take rungs 2 at a time on ladders. It was a concrete surface with a low wall enclosing the edge. 2 vents protruded from the shop below, and something black nestled behind them drew Uriel's eye. He walked over and recognized the stock of a gun. The Archangel's heart skipped at the prospect of one of the weapons. His enthusiasm faded as quickly as it appeared, however, when the weapon came farther into view. It was the stock of a gun, the trigger and loading mechanism as well, but the other half of the gun was a meter away. The weapon, some sort of rifle, had been snapped in half by an inhuman force. Bullet casings littered the ground around it, both large and small. At one time, there had been a second, smaller gun, but it was impossible to know how long ago it had been taken. Sitting against the vent, hidden from the angel previously, was the body of a human, a man from the looks of the clothing that remained. Pieces of fabric and remnants of flesh still loosely clung to the bones, but he had been dead for a while. His ribcage had been smashed in, now only a hollow chasm in his chest. Demons, always finding ways of torturing humans, were fond of ripping out the hearts of their victims and consuming them in front of their prey. Claw marks on the low surrounding wall painted the picture enough for Uriel. He could almost see the terrible creatures climbing onto the roof, closing in on the panicked survivor. One building was left for the angel to examine, so he simply stepped onto the small lip that enclosed the roof and dropped to the ground below. If you've ever seen Underworld with Kate Beckinsale, it's exactly what she does from a church tower, I think it is, at the beginning of the movie. Super cool in my mind. Love it. After landing on his feet, Uriel made his way to the final building. Its ruinous state made it difficult to recognize from a distance, but soon Uriel realized the structure for what it used to be. The wood was charred and barely standing. The tall roof had collapsed in on itself, crushing the wooden pews inside. Shattered pieces of stained glass covered the ground, most of it burnt and blackened. Uriel walked through what was left of the scorched church, stepping over and ducking under the fallen beams. Many of the ashes had been blown away, but piles of debris and burnt bones remained in the corners and crevices of the broken holy site. Only the far wall had been left standing, but the Archangel's heart sank when he saw it. At the base of the wall were thousands of human bones from dozens of bodies, piling upwards towards the center of the wall. At its apex was an unholy mockery, human bones tied together in the shape of an inverted cross. The bones appeared to have been smeared with blood at one point, but much of the dark substance, browned with age, had been worn away by time and the elements. All around the gruesome icon were derogatory slurs written in the same dried, chipped blood that the cross was coated in. Disgusting, the angel whispered with malice. He could not leave such a tragedy standing. Both angels and demons knew that an inverted cross did not carry any true meaning. It was a symbol that struck fear in all humans, regardless of their faith or their saints. It was a symbol of evil, one that was adopted, not created, by hell. Nonetheless, it was an affront to Uriel's mission. It was an insult to the light he would bring to the world. Being careful not to step on the fragile bones, Uriel moved as close as he could and gently removed the tragic icon from the wall. It was a slow process, but the angel did not want any of the bones to break. Though it might have been futile, Uriel knew that the dead needed to be respected, even if they had been in such a state for years. He lowered the makeshift crucifix to the ground and drew one of his daggers. The old ropes, weathered and aged, came away easily, and the bones tumbled away from each other. Some of the ancient skeletal pieces crumbled when they hit the ground, but most stayed intact. Uriel moved the unbound bones back into the pile with the others and dropped to his knees on the charred wood in front of the mound. The Archangel pressed his hands together in front of his chest and began his whispered prayers. He spoke in angelic, the tongue of angels, most of which was not even translatable to a human language. In the times before the apocalypse, such a prayer would carry all the way to heaven and safely ferry the souls of the dead with them. The words of angels had a power of their own, but they were not nearly enough to break through the black clouds that smothered the planet. It meant no souls had been taken to heaven since they had lost the war. The angel's eyes flashed open mid-prayer. How could he be so foolish? On this new earth, under the black clouds, a prayer would be sensed by any of hell's creatures that were nearby. Its power was weak, but it would not go unnoticed. As if in response, he heard a piercing howl in the distance. Hellhounds. Alone the creature posed no threat to an angel. Even a pack would be hard-pressed to take down a lone warrior of heaven. It was not the pack that he was worried about, however. It was the attention the beast would draw. If a pack of hellhounds were to find him, other creatures would soon join in on the hunt. Watch over us, the angel finished in a human tongue. He rose to his feet and sprinted back into the forest towards the great evil he felt. The infernal wolves were fast. He would just have to be faster. And so concludes chapter 1. The intro to Archangel. There's a lot to dissect there. But for people who have read it before, or you just want to be, get a little more of the background on the story, it was a definite choice to take Uriel, our protagonist, and drop him down into this post-apocalyptic world. Rather than highlight the war that went on, we learn through his thinking, through what he sees, that there was already a war between heaven and hell has clearly won. You don't find abandoned villages, creepy forests, and inverted crucifixes made of bone if heaven won a war. At least not that easily. So that's the setting for the rest of Archangel, is this world where hell is in control of earth, and it's smothered in black clouds that restrict the connection between earth and heaven, and thus angels on earth are restricted from the source of their power and their home. But I'm not going to say any more than that, because any more than that would be a spoiler. And so leave your thoughts and comments down below. If you have the book and you notice that I missed something, or you heard something like 2 words repeated in a row, leave it down there, or shoot me an email. I'll leave my email in the description. And I'll leave a link in the description too if you want to pick up your own copy of Archangel. Looking forward to next week. Hope you enjoyed the first chapter, and I will see you later.